Coming up on Primetime News, Korea's ruling party floor leader makes a public apology to mend relations with the presidential office over a controversial revision on parliamentary law. Meanwhile, the opposition party boycotts legislative duties for the second day. And the United States slams Pyongyang's human rights record, calling it the worst in the world. While the MERS outbreak in Korea is showing signs of winding down, 2 more deaths reported today are pulling up the fatality rate to around 17%. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Friday, June 26th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us.
A day after President Park Geun-hye took aim at the ruling party and its floor leader for passing disputed revisions to the parliamentary law, ruling party floor leader Yoo Seong-min read a public apology to the president.
And while Yoo pledged to focus on fully supporting the president's state policies, strife within the ruling party is growing as a group of lawmakers are calling for his resignation. Our Choi Yoo-sun starts us off.
Ruling Saenuri Party floor leader Yoo Seong-min has publicly apologized to the president for the latest political upheaval over controversial revisions to the National Assembly law.
I, once again, apologize to President Park Geun-hye. I hope she will be able to ease her anger and forgive the party.
Citing concerns that giving the parliament power to request changes to government ordinances could be unconstitutional, President Park vetoed the bill the day before, accusing the floor leader, who led negotiations for the bill, of doing politics for personal interests. In his own defense, Yoo stressed that his priority since taking the floor leadership 4 months ago was passing the bill to reform the public employee pension system, one of President Park's major reform initiatives. The floor leader acknowledged he may not have given enough thought to the president's concerns about the opposition party pushing to link the reform bill to the parliamentary law revisions.
More than anybody else, I earnestly hope for the success of the president and her administration.
Yoo then vowed to normalize the party's relations with the presidential office and seek ways to secure the opposition's cooperation on passing bills aimed at revitalizing the economy. But ruling party lawmakers close to the president are pressuring Yoo to step down, and there's speculation that some members of the party's Supreme Council may withdraw, which will deal a blow to the party leadership. This is considered as a reflection of President Park's position that Yoo has lost the public's trust as a politician. Even the opposition party has turned its back on Yoo, expressing disappointment that he has bowed down to the president. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the opposition party continues on to the second day of suspending legislative duties.
And the party leader slammed President Park Geun-hye's veto, forcing the parliament into a deadlock. Our Park Ji-won tells us more.
In a public address on Friday morning, chairman of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy, Moon Jae-in, accused the presidential office of fueling political strife. He said now is the time for the president to apologize for the government's poor initial handling of the MERS outbreak, instead of disregarding the National Assembly and threatening democracy. He added that the president's veto violates the spirit of the Constitution as it infringes on the National Assembly's legislative duties.
It's a direct attack on the parliament's legislative power. The administration is attempting to manipulate the law and reign over the assembly. It is a violation of the Constitution, which stipulates division of powers. It's unacceptable.
The floor leader of the main opposition party also said on Friday that the veto law was agreed upon by both parties.
It began with the implementing ordinances of the special Sewol-ho ferry law, which violated the core elements of the special ferry law. The vetoed law represents the will of the parliament to change the situation. Both rival parties agreed on the bill.
The revised parliamentary law that sparked a standoff between the Assembly and the President's office allows the Parliament to request modification of executive ordinances that are not in accordance with the original law. The floor leader of the Liberal Party stressed that the Assembly made clear that its request for changing the ordinances was merely a suggestion and not legally binding, presenting no real threat to administrative power. However, he accused the President's office of causing unnecessary political wrangling by using inappropriate terms like unconstitutional and administrative paralysis. The main opposition party has declared an all-out boycott of Assembly activities until Parliament holds a revote. Subsequently, all of Friday's scheduled standing committee meetings have been cancelled. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now on to the latest updates of MERS outbreak in Korea. One more case was confirmed today, lifting the tally to 181. The health ministry says the latest confirmed MERS patient is a 26-year-old doctor at Samsung Medical Center that treated patient number 135 earlier this month. And 2 patients with pre-existing ailments passed away overnight. Now, the fatality rate stands at 17.1%, with about 93% of the deceased being high-risk patients with pre-existing illnesses. The number of quarantines seemed to be on decline, but rose to more than 2,900, while some 260 people were released from quarantine. 81 patients have fully recovered from MERS. All but 13 patients undergoing treatment are in a stable condition. And as for the patient who flew to China prior to his MERS diagnosis, Chinese health officials have informed Korea that he has fully recovered from the disease and was discharged from the hospital Friday morning. China bared the cost of his treatment, which totaled more than $1 million.
In other news, the United States has labeled North Korea's human rights record among the worst in the world. Washington's worst ever assessment of Pyongyang's treatment of its people shows it took a key UN report on the issue into account. For details, let's turn to Arkani Kim.
The U.S. government has lowered its already grim assessment of North Korea's human rights record, saying the regime's treatment of its people remains among the worst in the world. The U.S. State Department's country reports on human rights practices for 2014 released on Thursday said the regime commits systematic, widespread, and gross human rights violations, and such violations constitute crimes against humanity. A U.S. official says Washington will continue to shine the spotlight on the North's abuses.
We are doing everything we can to try to get knowledge and information to the people of North Korea so that this trend continues.
The report reveals stories of public executions and unimaginable torture, such as locking prisoners in a tiny room for weeks on end. And parts were gleaned from the UN Commission of Inquiry's report, hinting that Washington had taken that report into consideration for the first time. The UN's 370-page report published last February outlined the regime's human rights abuses, including torture and arbitrary imprisonment. It also recommended the regime's leadership, including Kim Jong-un, be referred to the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. For years now, Washington's assessment of North Korea's human rights record has consistently been labeled as grim, deplorable, and poor. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The Korean government has rolled out a roughly $13.5 billion stimulus package, including a supplementary budget to prop up the economy, currently scrambling from the MERS outbreak and sluggish exports.
The country's growth forecast has also been slashed to 3.1% for this year from its earlier projection of 3.8%. For more on the government's new measures and the outlook for the economy, we have Professor Yang Jun-seok from the Catholic University of Korea joining us. Thank you for making time for us, Professor Yang.
Happy to be here.
So the Finance Ministry has yet to release the exact amount of the supplementary budget, but what is your evaluation about this, and is there any possibility that it could hurt the country's fiscal health?
Well, I think the government felt that they had no choice this is actually somewhat lesser of many evils. But because the Korean economy has been so sluggish lately, and because some research institutions have been saying that the growth for this year will fall below 3%, and because the monetary policy has had a lot of good effect so far, I think the government felt that they had no choice but to engage in expansionary fiscal policy through the supplementary budget. Now, it will hurt the Korean economy in the long run somewhat because chances are our national debt will go up. But right now, I think this is the lesser of evils.
Well, the government's stimulus measures follow the central bank cutting the key rate to historic low of 1.5%, Professor. What are the risks that the Korean economy is facing that would lead to such drastic measures?
Okay, well, the biggest problem is that the growth rate has been falling even below what government expected. And I think government really doesn't want the growth rate to fall below 3%, not only for economic reasons, but for political reasons. In addition, there's this lack of consumption because of MERS outbreak, and I think everybody's been sort of hurt by the Sewol incident last year. Very few people thought that this would go longer than 6 months, because typically disasters, the effect from disasters only lasts 1 or 2 quarters. But because it's been linked with long-term issues, we've been seeing a long-term drop in consumption, and I think they wanted to hit this off, so they're acting proactively in a lot of ways.
Well, Professor Young, before we let you go, one last question. What about the government's drive to push through structural reforms?
Okay, that is, I think, definitely necessary. Part of the pessimism that we see in the Korean economy is things like the change in the age structure and problems that may come up with retirement for people in this particular age group. We need to perform some structural reforms to give the people long-term confidence in the Korean economy. But you also need to engage in short-term policies as well, because, well, even if they expect things to go better in the long run, if they don't expect things to go better in the short run as well, they're not going to consume.
So given the short-term measures by the government and also from the central bank, we hope to see some progress in the Korean economy. And thank you so much for your time, Professor Yang.
Thank you.
Some would say Jeju is the most convenient and popular local vacation destination, and the resort island is looking for support to digitalize its tourism content and make it more accessible to visitors. Song Ji-san takes a look at the opening of the government's Innovation Center to help cater to that need.
Judging from its annual growth of 60%, Jeju Island is attracting more and more visitors. With over 12 million tourists visiting last year, Jeju is now a more popular destination than even Hawaii or Bali. However, its tourism programs need to evolve. Most contents remain offline in the form of tour pamphlets and have yet to be transferred to online databases. Thus, the government is trying to reboot Jeju Island. A new innovation center will help set up a ubiquitous computing environment through beacons, utilizing location data. This means tourists can automatically receive discount coupons or information when approaching nearby businesses. The platform will be open to any developer that wishes to take part.
위치 기반 IT 서비스와 컨텐츠를 연계하고 지역 내 혁신 기관간 네트워크를 통해서 제주를 관광 인력 육성과 관광 산업의 허브로 육성하고자 합니다. 제주 혁신센터에서는 관광의 질적 내실화를 위해 스마트 관광 기반을 구축하고 중국 관광객들에게 실시간 관광 콘텐츠와 빅데이터 분석을 통한 맞춤형 서비스를 지원하게 될 것입니다.
IT services required to develop applications will be provided by Dam Kakao, Korea's leading web portal which has called the island home for over a decade. It will also provide network of professionals in Northeast Asia, in line with the center's goal of catering to startups that lack access to human resources.
Many IT firms moved to Jeju Island following Daum Kakao, but it is hard for them to recruit experts because it's isolated from the mainland. We will establish a human resources database called Human Library to help.
With just 4 more centers set to open their doors, the government's map of creative economy centers is almost complete. On criticism that these centers are not serving their purposes just yet, the government says it will now focus on promoting these centers to let potential startups know about the services and support they can receive. 송지선, Arirang News.
Now, Apple's highly anticipated smartwatch launched in Korea today, some 2 months after it's released in other major markets. With domestic tech giants like Samsung and LG having already marking their presence in the local market, Apple is expected to heat up the competition. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Pouring rain was not enough to dampen the spirits of people gathered outside this Apple store in Seoul's shopping district of Myeongdong. Arriving before the crack of dawn, they were there to ensure they got their hands on the Apple Watch, which went on local release on Friday.
I came to the store early yesterday and got the first ticket. And I got here at 5:30 a.m. today just to make sure I can buy one.
3 models of the Apple Watch have been released in Korea. The most basic costs $360. The most expensive, well, that comes with a much heftier price tag.
I'm trying on the $20,000 18-karat gold Apple Watch. At first glance, it doesn't seem as intuitive as the iPhone, and you need some time to understand it. And some of the features, such as fitness tracking, runs without a phone nearby.
The popularity of the Apple Watch was anticipated long before its release, with online malls like auctions saying their stock has already been snapped up. I asked a fan who already owns an Apple Watch about its appeal.
I was worried about the short battery life, but it lasts up to 2 days without additional charging, and I love the design. Other than the part that it requires an iPhone, it's basically perfect.
Despite the fanfare, some local experts aren't entirely convinced.
The Apple Watch is likely to remain as a fashion accessory rather than a tech product for now, as it doesn't do much for the price you pay. Sales estimates for the watch this year have already been slashed from 20 million to 16 million. To take the upper hand, Korean smartwatch makers have to improve the software-related functions and make them more appealing for use in a corporate setting.
The Apple Watch is expected to force Korean rivals Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics to step up their game. Samsung is set to release its newest smartwatch, the Galaxy Gear A, later this year. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The fastest way to a man's heart is through his stomach, they say. Let's talk about food now. Korean food, or 한식, is enjoying a real boom in popularity around the world. And according to our Na Yeon-kyung, this global awakening to the wide variety of delicious and healthy Korean dishes is being reflected at this year's World Expo in Milan.
Era ottimo is what many Italians are saying as they leave the Korea Pavilion after tasting Korean food, or 한식. Korea is one of the 145 countries taking part in this year's Milan World Expo, with food being the main theme of the event. For some, it's a totally new experience, while for others, it's a delightful reunion.
I came to the Korean pavilion and liked it so much that I decided to stay for lunch. I really enjoy the Korean specialty cuisine and I would recommend it to everybody.
When I visited the Korea Pavilion last week, I really liked it, so I came back today, this time to eat. I like it so much that I think I'll come here again or find a Korean restaurant in Milan to have Korean food.
It hasn't been long since Korean food established its reputation in Italy. Industry experts say it's tough to please the palates of the locals because of the pride and love Italians have for their own cuisine and stronger presence of Japanese and Chinese cuisine. In Milan, for example, the number of Korean restaurants has tripled to about 9 from 6 years ago. However, they did not command much brand power until the expo. The restaurant at the Korea Pavilion has welcomed nearly 30,000 visitors for each of the past 2 months, and the chief manager says educating customers in terms of both plating and flavor of their meal is key.
We arranged the foods on one plate to clearly distinguish the appetizers, main dish, and dessert. We also created a recipe that would slightly reduce the flavor of garlic. It was enough to ease the customers into 한식, yet maintain its authenticity.
What is certain is that the Milan Expo has stimulated interest in 한식, but officials here do say that the next crucial step will be to keep this momentum beyond October after the expo ends.
나현경, Arirang News, Milan.
And for the top international headlines, we connect now to our Paulie at the News Center.
Paul, before we talk about the title match between a talking teddy bear and man-made dinosaurs, let's begin in France. Top authorities are investigating a shocking attack at a gas factory in the southeast of the country. Please give us the details.
Well, the details are still coming out on the suspected assault near Lyon. However, France's Prime Minister Manuel Valls has already declared it an act of Islamist terrorism. Police reportedly said they found a decapitated head covered in Arabic writing after two assailants rammed a car into the site on Friday. Speaking in Brussels, President François Hollande called on the French people not to give in to fear or racism.
The attack is of a terrorist nature since a body was discovered, decapitated and with inscriptions. As I speak, there is one fatality and two injured. The French Interior Minister immediately went to the site with the prosecutor. A suspect has been arrested and identified. Major police resources have been deployed in the area.
The French public prosecutor said its anti-terrorist section has been deployed to investigate in what it described as an organized attack. And staying in Europe, the German Navy has rescued over 600 migrants at sea after their wooden boats became stranded in the Mediterranean. Officials said they had responded to a maritime emergency at some 55 kilometers off the coast of Libya. The rescue comes as EU leaders signed and agreed on a plan to tackle the rising number of people fleeing to Europe to escape war and poverty.
I believe the migrant crisis is the biggest challenge I've encountered during my time in office in terms of European affairs. We have already seen a wide range of challenges from the global financial crisis to the euro crisis. It is a giant task we have to face.
The new political agreement, which is non-binding, calls for EU member countries to take in 60,000 migrants from North Africa and the Middle East. And finally, the battle for the summer box office is showing no signs of cooling down, with a wave of new films set to hit the big screen. At the front of the pack is Seth MacFarlane's Ted 2, which is forecast to pull in $58 million in its opening weekend. The comedy sequel is expected to bump Jurassic World to the #2 spot on the box office ladder, with the dinosaur blockbuster continuing to break worldwide records. And taking third place, Disney and Pixar's animated film Inside Out is predicted to add a solid $51 million to its global revenue amid high praise from movie critics. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here on Monday.
Long-awaited showers finally soaked the entire nation, but Seoul didn't get enough to ease the drought. Likewise, cities like Chuncheon in Gangwon-do province only saw the precipitation of 23.3 or 2 millimeters. But this drastically contrasts with the amount that other parts of the nation received, including the eastern parts of the Gangwon-do province and Daejeon in the central region. And rain clouds that were hovering over the Korean peninsula seems to have scattered for the time being, hinting at a break from monsoon rains during the weekend. And that means that the mercury levels will rise again, with highs peaking at the near 30s in the capital under mostly to partly sunny skies. But there could be pop-up showers in some of the southern regions. On that note, let's take a closer look at the readings for tomorrow. Highs in Seoul will reach at 29, while Daegu and Gwangju top out at 26 and 27, while Busan climbs up to 24 tomorrow afternoon. And as for the other parts, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 28 and 25, while Dokdo rises to 21. Well, that's all for me this week. Have a wonderful weekend.
just watching those visuals cools you off quite nicely. Well, that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you so much for staying with us. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Have a great weekend, and please join us at the same time next week. Goodbye for now.